I'll call this meeting to order. It's now 10 o'clock. Please stand for the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the Republic, nation, under God. Have the roll call, please.
Clerk Powers.
Here.
Mike Magar.
Here.
Katie Pritchard.
Here.
Terry Johnson is excused. Jeremy Leonard.
Here.
Jason Krashauer.
Here.
And Christopher Farr is excused.
Have a quorum with 5. Thing is adopting the agenda. Does anybody have any questions on the agenda? Not, the chair entertains a motion to adopt.
Make a motion to adopt the agenda.
So Commissioner Krashauer made the motion, and we have a second. So just a voice vote at this point to adopt the agenda. All in favor say aye.
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 Motion adopted. The agenda is good. So we now have moved to the business from the public. This is an opportunity for anyone to give a brief presentation about any land use planning issue of county concern that is not on the agenda. See nobody here or nobody online. Okay, so then we move into public hearings. And the public hearing is on Ordinance 2402, Comprehensive Plan Goal 5 Update. This is a legislative hearing regarding Ordinance 24-02, legislative text amendments related to the updates to Goal 5. Does any commissioner have a conflict of interest to report? See none here or online. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the commission to hear this matter at this time? See none here or online. So then we go to the staff report. Will you please make your report?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Vice Chair Powers. For the record, I'm Gail Henriksen, Community Development Director. And the Planning Commission will remember that for the past 4 or 5 years, we've been working on updates to the comprehensive plan. And this is something that really hadn't been holistically done for over 40 years, and so the updates were long overdue. The board in June of this year adopted the updates for goals 1 through 4, 6 through 14, and goal 19. We deliberately kept goal 5 out of the mix due to its complexity and the amount of work that still needed to be done on that. And then we are working with consultants with CREST to update goals 16, 17, and 18, and then that would complete our comprehensive plan update process. So goal 5, as I stated, is very complex. It has 15 required and recommended inventories, and it's more or less the place where things that didn't fit into other goals have been lumped together, in my opinion. So it covers everything from riparian corridors, wetlands, scenic rivers, historic resources, cultural resources, quarry and mining, energy sources, and several other recommended and required inventories. And almost all of those apply to Clatsop County. So we are very bountiful, but that means we also have a lot of work when it comes to Goal 5. So in your packet for today, we've prepared a summary memo, and this Goal 5 is something that Julia, Ian, and I worked on. We had to split it up just because it was so large and complex. So all 3 of us are here to answer questions. But from the last time that the Planning Commission looked at this in August of last year until now, a lot of the changes that we have made were partly to reorganize, make it easier to read. So we've pulled that narrative, as we did with the other goals, and moved it into a separate background report. That's also part of your package here today. We've done some rearranging so that things align better. We also did the same review that we did with the other goals, comparing our policies proposed in Goal 5 to what is mandated under statewide planning Goal 5 and the applicable Oregon administrative rules that implement the statewide planning goal. So anything that is not mandated or required has become a should or a may, anything that is required is now a will or a shall, and you'll see that reflected in the policies that are in Goal 5 here before you today. Other than that, Ian, Julia, and I are here to answer your questions, and you'll see that there's also on page 13 of your agenda package possible actions that your Planning Commission can take today, along with a suggested motion if you do want to take action today. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the commissioners have any questions at this point? Okay.
No questions.
Well, then we'll, I'm sorry. I hear somebody?
Katie Pritchard had a question, I
Oh,
believe.
go ahead,
I'm
Katie.
sorry, no, I just said no questions.
Oh. All right, then we'll go into call for public testimony. This hearing is open for public testimony. Failure to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the board or to LUBA based on that issue. All speakers from the floor are to sign in, state their name and address before speaking. If you are appearing as a representative capacity, identify who you represent. Limit your remarks, please, to 3 minutes in order to permit all present an equal opportunity to speak. Do we have anybody from the public that wishes to speak? See none here.
Vice Chair, just
we have one?
we did receive one email comment this morning.
Okay.
This is from Donna Bang, representing the Chinook Cultural Committee for the Chinook Indian Nation, and he was also part of several citizen advisory committees that worked on the community plans as well. His comment that was emailed to us this morning at, actually yesterday evening at 10:12 p.m. was any information from this hearing that affects the status of the Chinook Nation will require a response from same. And that was his comment. I did also mean to tell the Planning Commission that we, as staff, have met with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife about 2 weeks ago. They had reviewed this draft that you have before us. They had some thoughts that they might want to recommend some changes, but we have not received any comments from them as of this time, and I don't see them here at the meeting today. So.
Okay, thank you. Well, hearing none other public testimony, I consider that part of the agenda closed. Are there any public agencies other than the Fish and Wildlife here for comments? No. Are there any other comments from the public? Seeing none. And therefore, we don't have to worry. Does staff wish to respond to anything that you talked about earlier?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any other final questions of staff? Okay, so I'm sorry, I was premature in closing the public testimony. Now we'll close the public testimony. So now discussion is open to the Planning Commission's members. Are there any members that wish to provide comments or questions concerning this ordinance? You guys are going to make it too easy. Wow. Nobody? Well, I can tell you I found it quite complex. Someone who hasn't had to deal with Gold 5, and I read it at least 3 times trying to comprehend all the information you had between the background report, the ordinance, and the summary. And thank you for the summary.
You're welcome.
Okay? That was very enlightening, very informative, so I thank you for that. Other than that, I have no other questions myself, and again, I look at the commissioners. Everybody is silent. So the chair entertains a motion. The potential motions are on page 13 of your packet. The chair is not allowed to make a motion, so we need a motion from some member.
Recommend the Board of approve Ordinance 24.
Is there a second? Commissioner Crashaw seconds. So we have
Okay.
a motion. Okay, sorry. We have a motion to approve the ordinance as presented, and we have a second. Therefore, do we have any other comments on the motion or amendments? Okay,
No
then we'll
comments.
go to a roll call. No, I'm sorry.
No comment.
No comment. Okay. So we'll go to a roll call vote.
Mike Magyar,
Aye.
Katie Pritchard,
Aye.
Jeremy Leonard,
Aye.
Jason Crashauer,
Aye.
Clark Power,
Aye. Okay, we have 5, 4, and 2 not present, so the motion passes.
Thank you. And this item will now be scheduled for 2 public hearings with the Board of Commissioners in January.
Okay, good. So we move on to the next item on the agenda, discussion of implementation of HB 3197, provide clear and objective standards.
That'll be me again. So in this current or past legislative session, the legislature passed House Bill 3197, which, among other things, requires counties to apply clear and objective standards for housing in unincorporated areas, particularly in unincorporated communities, rural residential lands, and non-resource lands. So here in Clatsop County, everything that is conservation, natural, farm, forest, or that is strictly commercial or industrial is exempt from this, but any of our zones that allow housing will be required by July 1st, 2025 to apply clear and objective standards. So what that means is if you have a zone that says, for example, vegetation should be preserved to the greatest extent possible, that is not clear and objective because you can't quantify it. And it's very subjective depending upon who's reviewing that. So in order to be in compliance with this new rule by July 1st of 2025, staff has put forward a schedule in your packet beginning on page 81 that lays out what we will be looking at over the next several months, going all the way, I believe, into April of 2025. So when we look at the clear and objective standards, this is something that used to be required for cities prior to 2017 when we were discussing needed housing, which is primarily affordable housing. In 2017, I believe it was House Bill 1050 or Senate Bill 1015 that made it mandatory for all housing within an urban growth boundary. And then this past legislative session, it's now applied to the unincorporated areas. And so this is a very big change for our code, and it's going to be a very big undertaking for staff as we move forward with this. The schedule looks a little bit aggressive. We are hoping that some of the less certain aspects of this are in the process of being addressed through other ordinances that we're working on, like the non-conforming uses, the updates to the accessory dwelling units and things like that. And with the proposed housing amendments that we'll be looking at in the upcoming year, we're hoping that a lot of this will get addressed on a separate but parallel track. But really, I just wanted to give the Planning Commission just an overview of what we're going to be undertaking this year and the next year. And so we'll be looking at our procedures, our zoning standards, and it's going to apply in natural resource areas where, for example, to wetlands and measuring buffers and things like that. So it's going to be a lot of work. So really just today I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of it, aware of what we're looking at, why we're looking at it, and what our outcome will be in 2025. So I'm really here today to answer any questions you might have about this or the process or our schedule. Thank you.
Thank you. So any of the commissioners have questions?
Gail,
Comments?
I have a question for Gail. Gail, is this something you're going to be working on next year, and it needs to be finalized by 2025?
Correct. It becomes effective July 1st, 2025.
Okay, great. Thank you for your help.
You're welcome.
Any other commissioner?
Could you, besides the zoning ordinance, what else has to be gone through?
So the law duck has 6 articles in it, and they cover, Article 4 is just the zoning standards itself, your setbacks, your building heights, and those things. Article 1 is definitions, and that may not be too much work, but we want to make sure that the definitions are clear and that they don't contain standards in them. So one that comes to my mind is that we define accessory building as subordinate to the main use. And so that's pretty subjective. Does that mean subordinate in size, subordinate in the number of hours it's used compared to the house? So there'll be some cleanup work there. So that'll be the first thing that we're going to look at. And then in February, we're going to move into our procedures and our applications and how those are processed and the criteria that we're looking at and just working through all those different things. So for property lines, subdivisions, conditional use permits, review uses, anything that could potentially deal with the construction of housing is going to have to be reviewed to make sure that those standards are clear and objective. Moving on from there, Article 3 deals with siting standards, so the parking, signage, and I'm trying to think what else is in there, water supply, how we calculate the average height of a building or the average grade. So things in there. I think Article 3 is generally in pretty good shape, but it also covers mobile home parks, RV parks, things like that, things that we haven't really looked at. And then we talked about Article 4, the zoning. Article 5 is special districts, so that's your flood zone, your geologic hazard overlay, the shoreland overlay, whole variety of overlays there. Some of them we don't use very much, like the planned development overlay, which deals with planned housing developments, so that we'll need to really take a good look at that one. And then Article 6 deals with the environmental issues, riparian vegetation, the development along the estuary and resource, resource capability assessments and impact statements and things like that. That will be a much harder one to go through, I think, because it's a little bit more complex and just taking our time going through that one. So that will be our very last one that we'll go through. But what our goal is to make sure that anything that could apply to housing is very clear in how it's presented. And one thing I forgot to tell you in my presentation is that in addition to the clear and objective standards, which we are required to have July 1st, 2025, the county can also maintain a discretionary path forward using basically our current regulations as well, and a developer would have the option to choose. So they can choose clear and objective. If they want to have more flexibility, they can do the discretionary, and in return, under the House Bill 3197, there's density requirements that the county would have to ensure the developer receives if they want to choose this more nebulous path forward. So there is that option as well. As staff, we're recommending that we provide both pathways forward. So keeping what we have, but then adding in the clear and objective standards so that everybody has the choice about how they want to move forward in a development situation. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
Yeah, would you clarify a little bit more
So
on the alternate method?
it's kind of like your mother saying, okay, if you clean your room and pick your shoes up, you can have 2 cookies. But if you make the house look really spick and span, whatever that means, you can have 3 cookies. So that's a really simplified version of it, but that's the first thing that came into my head. So obviously I'm hungry and want a cookie.
Is there something on the negative side, as in they pick the alternative? They just have to comply with whatever the county has for alternatives?
Yeah, so for example, in a zone where it might say preserve the native vegetation to the maximum extent possible versus you will preserve 25% of the vegetation on your property. So that would be a clear and objective standard. But greatest extent possible is, it may mean one thing to me, one thing to you, and a different thing to Julia. So as a developer, if I choose the greatest extent possible pathway, maybe I get to build an extra unit because of that density requirement that the county has to meet. By you taking on a greater risk, we're giving you something in return. The risk that you're undertaking, though, is that you have a higher chance of appeal. You have a chance that staff may look at what you think is the greatest extent possible and say, no, that's not quite what we had in mind. It could add more time to a project. It could add more expense to a project. It adds a little bit of uncertainty if a project were to come before a hearings officer or the planning commission or the board, and any of those look at it and say, well, we don't think it's the greatest extent possible, go back and redesign. So the whole intent of clear and objective standards is to create certainty and a very clear path forward for someone who's constructing. Does that help explain better?
Yeah, thank you. That did for me.
Yeah, I think I understand it, but would you have then two sets of everything?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Hey, Gail,
And I've been yeah, Mike?
is there going to be, so if you're changing code, I know that we can't, or not changing, but clarifying code, it always has to be more restrictive. Are we working with other counties to see what kind of changes they're making to make it more consistent across the state? I mean, at least regarding the desire to create more housing, right? Like, we don't really want to go through this and make everything more difficult for land developers, more difficult than it needs to be. Is there a way that we're going to ensure that we can clarify but also help streamline the process to meet those housing goals?
Yeah, so two parts to my answer here. So thinking about the other 35 counties in the state, the Association of Oregon Counties, the planning directors have started a discussion on this. I think it's Deschutes, who's always first out of the gate, is already moving forward. I haven't seen their revisions yet, but they've at least started the process, like we're starting the process here. And throughout the year, as we hold our monthly meetings, we'll be discussing what other counties are doing as part of that group. And then to answer the second part about trying to streamline and things, that is a lot of what's proposed in the housing amendments that staff has put forward and that the board looked at on October 4th. And part of that would be to streamline the process, reduce the fees, move things from being a conditional use to a type 1, such as your duplex units, so that you don't have to go out for public comment and public notice to construct what is basically two attached single-family dwellings. Just trying to make that whole process a little bit easier for everyone. And then I guess the third part of this is that we would be looking to create those clear and objective standards for all types of housing development so that people have the option to choose something that is very precise and quantifiable as they move forward. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thanks, Gail.
Okay, you're welcome.
This is going to be difficult at best. I mean, I see a waterfall of effects that could affect everything here. I mean, if the goal is more housing, but we have to worry about water, we have to worry about sanitation, we have to worry about also, we can make all the rules or the conditions we want, but if we don't have the structure to fulfill that, it's kind of a moot point. I mean, it's nice to see a little less fees and easier conditional use permits or just regular permits issued, but it's a way bigger aspect of the whole build, and the construction process is being able to build it on the property, getting water available, sewer's not available in the unincorporated, 90% of it. Mm-hmm. So it's septic systems, and now we're being so stringent on septic systems. I mean, this is like kind of I see this, it's going to be very difficult. I mean, obviously I'm pro more housing, and I want to get more affordable housing, but I think as we get more housing available, it's going to get more expensive. not the goal of affordable. What I've been following on this.
Yeah. And so we have to keep in mind, too, that in that series of statewide planning goals, Goal 14, which is urbanization, Goal 11, which is public facilities and services, are really geared towards pushing the residential development and the density within the urban growth boundaries. And so that's where the majority of the growth should be occurring, and it shouldn't be on the unincorporated areas where our task is to protect farm and forest lands. You know, that's the whole basis, basically, of the statewide planning system, is protect the farm and forest lands, because they feed us, they generate income, they generate jobs, you know, and that's a big part of what this state is. So we have to keep that in mind. We as unincorporated county are never going to provide the levels of housing that a Seaside or a Warrenton or an Astoria are going to provide. That's just not the role that we play as a county. So, but, you know, until we have water to serve everybody, I mean, it is a concern. And, you know, if the capacity of a water district is 500 households, we can, you know, zone land to, you know, create 1 million, but if all they can serve is 500, that's all that they're ever going to serve. So,
Doesn't solve the problem.
yeah. Yeah.
Any other commissioner have comments? Okay, well, my only comment is looking at this schedule was we got to balance this schedule with everything else that may come before the Planning Commission in the next year. So other than that, I think we will have a challenging year. I look forward to it. Do any of the commissioners have any questions on the schedule, or are they content with what has been proposed by staff?
Everything looks great. Looks like a lot of hard work. I hope we get enough people in the community with expertise that can weigh in a you know, a sober, reasonable manner. That's what I'm hoping.
Thank you. Anyone else? I don't know, other than that, what you need from us. It looks like it's a press forward with the schedule you have presented.
Yep.
Yes?
Yes.
You guys are pretty optimistic with this.
Well, that,
Well,
with
we
everything else
left
we
it-
got going on coming up.
We
Yeah.
left a few months in case there is an appeal. But if there is an appeal to LUBA, then we will not hit our July 1st, 2025 deadline.
Okay, then, we'll move on to the project status report.
All right, nothing really much to report this month. I just highlighted where we are moving forward with the Goal 5 update that you looked at today. There are 2 Goal 11 exceptions that went before the Planning Commission in October are scheduled for their final reading with the board tomorrow evening. And those were all the updates that we had this month for our projects.
Okay. Anyone with questions from the commissioners? All right, then we'll move on to the director's report.
All right, just a few items. As I mentioned earlier, we have contracted out with CREST to update goals 16, 17, and 18. Ian Sisson, our senior planner who's here today, he has been working with CREST. He's kind of taking the lead on that project and working with them on their project management side. And so we are hoping probably to have the initial kickoff meeting either in late January or early February with that. He has been working with identifying the stakeholders and working with CREST to get notices out and work with those people there. The economic opportunities analysis, we did our first kickoff meeting November 15th, and we will be having another one on January 25th, I believe at 10 a.m. That will be meeting number 2. We will be looking at the buildable lands inventory that Johnson Economics is preparing, along with some economic and workforce data that's being provided by the state. So that should be an interesting meeting. There is a link on the county's website on our calendar if anybody's interested to tune in to that meeting. No updates really on short-term rentals or the housing task force. Everything's kind of in a hold right now, pending holidays and things like that. So we've just kind of let those sit for a while. The law duck amendments to facilitate housing that I talked about that the board looked at on October 4th. The Arch Cape Community Club is holding their own meeting about those amendments Thursday evening, I believe at 6 p.m. And then the county will be hosting a public information session on January 16th at 5 p.m. That will be a hybrid meeting, both here in the Boynton and via Zoom, and that link is also up on the calendar on the county's website. And then the Farm Forest Improvements Project, we wrapped up our last meeting last week on potential issues and potential solutions related to the farm and forest zones, and that's a statewide committee that has been looking at these issues. So they will be making a report to the Land Conservation and Development Commission, I believe in January, and then getting direction from LCDC at that meeting. They're also generally going to be talking about farm and forest things at a special meeting on December 18th, and you can find those links on the DLCD website, or if you want to attend, let me know and I'll find the link and send it over to you. And the reason we have this on here is Ian and I were both on that committee, and also because anything that comes out of it in terms of new rulemaking is going to affect our farm and forest lands, so we want to make sure that we're involved and monitoring what's happening with those proposed changes. And that's my report. Thank you. Oh, and just one more thing. I feel like Columbo, because every time I've spoken today, it's been, oh yeah, one more thing. Again, this is Julia's last Planning Commission meeting, so I just wanted to say again, thank you, and we have really just so much appreciated having you here. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as good of the order, but thank you for bringing it up, because, yeah, we are highly appreciative of everything you've done for us.
You're most welcome, and I thank you all for your service and your work.
Yeah, Julia, you've been unbelievably incredible, and your reports and comments and thoughtfulness and thoroughness. I just hope that we can maybe come close to replicating it someday soon. Thank you again.
And I second and third that. It's been a pleasure, and you've been very helpful in making sense of the chaos for us.
Any other items for good of the order? Well, I don't know if this is the shortest one on record, but it's pretty close. Wow. Well, then I declare this meeting closed.
You all are official.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yeah, happy holidays. Let's say that officially. I'm sorry.
Clerk for president. Let's go.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.